Chris.Herries, who's going to talk about contaminated land sampling. And Chris, I know personally, jumped right in and got stuck in right at the start. So he's regional manager for Horticentre in Hawke's Bay and does stuff.
Yeah, so my talk's really about what happened just right at the very start when the cyclone first hit. Steve and Dan have both covered quite a bit about what you found in the silt, so I'll whiz through some of my slides quite quickly. I've got a little bit of knowledge with flooding just because in 1988 I was in Cyclone Bola. I was managing an orchard in Gisborne, and that was right between Paratai and Manutuke, and really badly flooded and had to deal with large amounts of silt and stuff like that. The bush telegraph started straight away with the cyclone. The silt, these are sort of things that I was getting told by growers when I was going up their driveways trying to assist and help them, that the silt was toxic. It will poison the ground, we've got to remove it. The septic tanks overflow and the silt is contaminated. The spray sheds have been, a number of spray sheds have been washed away. The silt has sealed off the top of the original topsoil, and the roots of the trees will die because of the lack of oxygen. And the silts were full of heavy metals and carcinogens. But I didn't have any data to say that's right or wrong, so that's why we jumped in pretty quickly and went out there and did some sampling. It was a pretty tough, 5 days after the cyclone. It was a pretty tough time to try and get samples to labs and things like that, and but yeah, and also opening up the road so we could actually get through to from Hastings through to the Esk Valley and that, and actually collect some samples. Cool. The real thing that was really evident at the time was just how the silt was very different. So this is just walking along, taking the samples, and how different the samples were. And if you were right close to the stop bank where the water was flowing fast and it just entered over from the river, it was really sandy. It was really like the Esk Valley. The particle sizes were quite big, and even just 5 days after the cyclone, there was no water in the Esk Valley. It drained and moved down through the profile because it was so sandy. The further away you got from the river source, the smaller the particles were. You moved more into silts, and then when you're down in the Pakowhai area there, we were dealing with a very different type of material, very fine, very clay type, silty clay type material. So it was really good. Hill Labs forced as soon as we got the samples to them, they put the information, they tested through really quickly for us, and we got the information back really quickly. We've talked about how the really high, quite high pHs, and very high, 94% of that material, the nutrition and that base saturation of calcium was, the calcium was 94% base saturation. Okay, and we were dealing with all the silts. Were dealing with 100% base saturation material, so that was the high loading of calcium that had come down from those samples. Cool. So up the top there, in the top corner there is where I collected the samples from. I collected the samples because I was also looking for contamination from the lower sort of parts of the catchment area, so that if any contaminants had come down, it sort of collected in that lower sort of area there. Cool. Dartmoor, so same sort of pattern, high pH, total base saturation, high calcium levels. Pakowhai. So when you went into Pakowhai, there's something that struck you straight away, and that was the smell. Okay, so in the Esk Valley, Dartmoor Valley, even Twyford, the water had gone away fairly quickly. The particle sizes were bigger, but in Pakowhai you had that anaerobic sort of thing starting to happen, and you could smell. There was a little bit more. There's more organic matter in this sample than the other samples because there's a bit of organic material that made their way down to this location, and it really started to stink and become quite unpleasant. Cool. The one thing that was quite interesting, and you can see how sticky, hopefully you can see the see the line between the silt and what was the old topsoil. So you had this really clay sort of material on the top in Pakowhai, but what was the original topsoil was actually surprisingly not as wet as what we were expecting, and it was quite aerated, and that's where of course all the tree roots were, so they were actually in an environment that was actually better than what we were expecting. Cool. And Twyford, the other thing that was worth noting, just when we moved into, there was a variation between the Esk River and the Turakuri River, and as soon as we moved into where the Narrowora River had a bit of an impact, the real difference was there was a bit more potassium in that in the samples, which is what we normally see with the Narrowora floodwaters. But all samples really, really low phosphorus levels as well, has been already talked about. Cool. So this is just me bring this up. Dan could comment on more accurately, but we were dealing with a mixture of subsoil and topsoil, and I've got there, it's probably something like 8 parts of subsoil and a couple parts of topsoil in that silt material that had come down. So that's why we had very little phosphorus. We had a whole lot of calcium and all those things in the samples. The Hawke's Bay Hill Country, it's not surprising, it's predominantly made up of soft sedimentary soils like siltsown, sandstone and grey wacke. From the Narrow River there is some volcanic influence from where that river comes from. I'll talk about that soon. And as we've talked about, it was very much about how far away you were from the original source and how fast the water was flowing as to the particle sizes that you're dealing with. Cool. So that was on the nutrition side. The other thing was about these heavy metals and things that had come down the river at the time. So we wanted to test that. And this is something that's really concerning because you get somebody in the media saying there's arsenic that's in the silt material or chromium or whatever, but it's exactly what we're talking about with the pathogens. You've got to quantify what that actually means. There's some information there. I've got minimum, mean and maximum levels. That's from that land care research document, which there was over 2,500 soil tests taken from around all over New Zealand trying to find out a background levels of these nutrients. So basically all the levels that were detected were within the normal bounds of what we would find in a New Zealand soil type. If we just look at arsenic as an example, that's always an interesting one that I find it interesting. But we've got the different catchment areas, and we talk about the Esk River and the Turakuri River that they both start at the ranges and they come out towards the ocean. the Narrowora is a little bit different in the fact that we have, it starts, you can see there, it originates from right back almost to Taupo, and we've got the Kaweka range which sits around about there, and we've got the Ruahine range that sits around about there, and so we're pulling material from through the ranges up in the back country there, which has more volcanic material that can come down and access in the Narrowora River, which so higher levels, arsenic is a natural occurring element in volcanic soils, so that's where that higher levels in those waters has come from. Hopefully that makes sense. So the other thing was about the spray sheds being washed away, and was there a whole lot of contamination that had come through from those spray sheds being tipped upside down and washed away and things. There's, you won't be able to read all that, but there was 487, I think, chemicals that were tested for out of those silt samples taken, and the really good news that this is only a few days after the cyclone, we had information back that said even taking the samples in the lower catchment areas for those different areas, we didn't actually detect anything out of those samples that were collected. So that was positive news. And when I talked to John Turner, who has done lots of work on flood response in different parts of the country previously, he was telling me that it's just the sheer volume of water. We heard, was it 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools for the Tutaukuri River? Well, we throw the Narrowora and that in as well. The sheer volume of water coming down, the dilution to parts per million is significant. Just on the agrichemical thing, our growers were really great. We as an industry, we got this up and going pretty quickly about collecting the agrochemicals that were lying around in spray sheds. There's a picture there of a spray shed that was pretty turned upside down with the water going through it. But the big thing is that at least 80% of the chemicals in a normal spray shed are inside a plastic container with a screw-on lid, and the containers might have been upside down or maybe not where they should have been, but hopefully they were still sealed. So we collected a huge amount of agrochemicals that all had to be sorted and everything, and then the bulk of that was shipped off to France, where it's gone through an incineration process to get rid of it. So that was a really great effort by everybody in the industry involved. Biological testing at that time, I couldn't get the samples to the lab in time with the roads being closed and that, so I didn't have any data out of that initial response. The silt is it's now part of our environment that we're all growing in, and when you look at good old Cape Kidnappers there, and you see the layers of sediment that have occurred, and that's thousands and thousands of years old. It is a natural part, and we're now in that environment growing in the soils that we're now dealing with on the Heretaunga Plains. So yeah, big thanks to John Turner for his inputs into the work, and that's just one example, and a huge applause out there to all the growers and what they actually did. This is just one little example of a block, and there's many, but over time, got the fruit off the trees. It was a heck of a lot of work, and we you look at all that material that was caught up on those trees. There was rooting occurring into that area where all the dirt and organic material was, and you're pulling all that material off. You had all the insects that was brought up earlier today. You had woolly apple aphid and all sorts of things living in underneath all that material. That all had to be removed by hand. There was no other way of doing it. And that was taken this morning, and that's the same property now, which is back to a commercial property. Thank you.